WALL-E is the greatest Pixar movie of all time, and you want to know why? Because you can't make sequels to it. Spoilers for WALL-E, I guess. The humans, they got off the spaceship, they planted a tree or whatever. Everything about the future of this species was already conveyed through the beautifully crafted end credit sequence. That's it. It ends there. Although, knowing Disney's corporate strategy nowadays, I guess you could make a prequel to WALL-E. In fact, there is a prequel, in comic book form, thanks to a partnership between Disney and comic book publisher Boom. 7 issues were made and released, all about the OG WALL-E's fun misadventures and origin story. YouTuber McDowell made an excellent video giving context and recapping that comic series if you're interested. And, it's about as somber and as tonally dark as you would expect. Way different from the movie. So, if we're going to make a proper movie prequel, I think we can take it one step further back. You know, what happened to get to the point where humans had to evacuate Earth to live on the spaceship, the Axiom. So it's gonna be like in typical whimsical Disney fashion. Before the little robot you all know and love, there was humanity. Watch the timeless tale of a giant megacorporation that literally owns everything, making the Earth uninhabitable due to pollution brought on by relentless overproduction. All for the sake of profits. Whoopsie! Witness how artificial intelligence and algorithms determine how we live our lives, increasing our dependence on screens. Whoa! Bask in a system that only wants us to consume in order to lull us into a state of complacency, never needing to think in any higher capacity or make any decisions that could meaningfully improve our lives. Coming soon in 2026. Does this feel a little too close to home? WALL-E was famously conceived during the historic Pixar lunch, where director Andrew Stanton conceived the idea of what if humanity had to leave Earth, but somebody forgot to turn off the last robot. Funny thing, he did not aim to make any kind of big political statement or morality tale. It seemed like he just wanted to make a cute little story about a lonely robot who adores Hello Dolly and then eventually falls in love. Aww.
A lot of people also wonder, was there some sort of message to this movie that we were trying to say? Are we trying to be preachy or environmental or ecological? You know, these are all noble things to support, but to be honest, I didn't have any agenda. I'm not that kind of a person and pretty quiet about my political opinions about things.
But in fleshing out the story and connecting the dots, Andrew Stanton and his team had to figure out why the humans left the planet in the first place. And if you're going to have that kind of love story, you might as well have that love story have an overall positive impact on humanity. So, in piecing together the story, they came up with one of the greatest movies ever made. Years later, for as much as WALL-E is tied to that particular point in time, it's still like essential Gen Z pop culture canon. Plus, its pro-environmental message resonated in the late 2000s when people briefly cared about the environment. Wow, that seems nice. What must that be like? All in all though, WALL-E feels way more relevant today than any other time, with its simplistic storytelling that even a tiny child could understand, and big chunks of the film relying on nonverbal dialogue. It honestly feels less like a Disney product, which it is, and more like a simultaneously timeless and modern parable or fable about humanity and society, about the dangers of corporate greed. It's like one of those folktales that have just always somehow existed, like the story of the prodigal son, or the monkey's paw, or the tale of Icarus. But, you know, instead of the sun, they flew too close to late-stage capitalism. That analogy worked better in my head. So, I want to talk about it here. Also, I know this may not have been the exact meaning that Andrew Stanton and company considered when creating the movie, so we're just going to set aside authorial intent for when we need it. Look, context, the time and place in which we interpret a piece of media does matter. So it might feel sometimes like I'm reaching. So go ahead and leave your "it's not that deep, bro" comments. Come on, get it out. Come on, give it to me. Get it out of your system. So the movie begins with protagonist Wally, left behind to clean up the pollution that humans were responsible for, while whatever is left of humanity is off on some luxury space cruise vacation. The Wally that we know is actually the last robot of his kind. Wally, by the way, standing for Waste Allocation Load Lifter Earth Class. And while Wally is obviously a robot, he seems to have acquired a personality. One predicated on wonder for his surroundings, an innate curiosity about how the world works, a distinct taste and enjoyment for the arts, and a true and very human yearning for companionship. That makes him incredibly adorable. But enough about the character. The backdrop where we're learning all of this is kind of bleak, to put it lightly. Piles of discarded trash engulf the planet, to the point where earlier on we see literal towers of trash the size of buildings that simply failed to be recycled or disposed of. They're just there. And so it begs the question, what happened to the world to get to this point, this level of pollution? Well, the answer is pretty obvious. In a single word, overconsumption. The more food and drink that people consume, the more products, electronics, fabrics, machinery are used on a day-to-day basis, then the more trash we generate, and the more full our landfills become. In fact, consumption shows up as a part of UN's Sustainable Development Goals, something that has to be minimized and or done responsibly, which is obviously a good thing. I agree, of course. However, I just have a teeny bit of an issue with the word consumption. See, because from the word, it then places the onus on the consumers not to consume as much. Those greedy, greedy peasants. But can you really fault majority of the world's population who may live around the poverty line or reside in the global south simply for existing and making economical choices to help themselves or their families? Well, there's something else in the introduction to Wall-E. We come to learn who is really in charge. In the movie, every billboard, every product is emblazoned with one logo, By and Large, or B&L. A mega corporation, probably closer to a gigacorporation, that owns, well, literally everything. In this apocalyptic view of future Earth, we still see remnants of old By and Large properties. Food, clothes, transit companies, shopping establishments, latrines, shipping vessels, heavy machinery, satellites, all with the B&L branding. And not only is B&L in charge of the banking system or the press and space settlements, but also the actual currency, the money. Plus, it fell to the B&L Corporation to save humanity, placing what was left of them on a B&L branded spaceship, and putting B&L run Wall-E robots in charge of the Earth cleanup drive. That's kind of absurd, right? How could a brand have that much power and omnipresence? Well, checking the DVD extras, we get a little bit of a clue. Remember DVD extras, kids? When filmmakers still had teams of passionate crew members, way less constrained by pressure from studios, who were willing to leave little bits of paratext in order to expand on the lore of the world. Anyway, ask your parents, I guess. A DVD featurette describes the history of the By and Large Corporation. So it starts off as a frozen yogurt brand and...
It acquired large industries, which seemed like a natural fit.
And of course, in typical corporate fashion, B&L goes on to capture the rest of the market through countless mergers and acquisitions. It's funny, back in the 90s and 2000s, I actually remember when a company buying out another company was celebrated and seen with admiration. Maybe in corporate circles it still is, but it honestly seems like nowadays, news of a corporate entity buying out another corporate entity is met with eye rolls and groans, frustration, even dread over the inevitable enshittification and degradation of products and services and content, making these things way worse on the customer, but they increase shareholder value, so that makes it okay. So this explains all the B&L branding across everything we see in that intro sequence to WALL-E. But of course, we get to the very end of that DVD featurette, and
With over 2 million wholly owned subsidiaries, governmental bodies, and healthcare centers, by and large has become the world leader in every conceivable field, including world leadership.
oh boy. I take it that the Pixar writers who were putting together this featurette, they weren't being totally serious, right? Like, this is such an obvious, comical parody of late-stage capitalism. In fact, there was even a fun little fictional by and large website made to promote the WALL-E movie, which very hilariously takes the piss. The website is down now, but thanks to the Internet Archive, you can still see the website in all its sterile, mid-2000s web design, flash-programmed business buzzword glory. And the team or creator responsible for this did not hold back. Here at By and Large, we always strive to positively impact your life and to give it more of the supreme effortlessness you love. Because at By and Large, we want you to leave your life to us.
We want you to leave your life to us.
And we certainly have a lot of fun poking at large corporations. We work for one, we've become one ourselves, and you're your own worst enemy sometimes. And so you can pick your poison, but everybody could already sees it happen in different parts of life of consumerism kind of almost governing how you run your life.
I also want to highlight one more section in this website, the quote robotics portion of this page, which has a section about tasks we as humans were never meant to do, like lawn mowing, vacuuming, surgery, food preparation, and political decision making. Yeah, let's put a pin in that. But like, going through these movie Easter eggs and ephemera again, it just feels so close to home nowadays. Like a strawman, tech bro, libertarian sweat dream. Finally, corporations can now operate unfettered, unrestrained from those pesky laws and regulations and governments, all in the pursuit of more money and shareholder profit margin. And now, with private companies in the tech industry especially experiencing unprecedented levels of growth and valuation that make the line go up, and governments taking on a more laissez-faire, hands-off approach, it does feel like the few CEOs of megacorporations in power are controlling the world. Okay, back to the movie. So when B&L was forced to come up with some kind of solution, what they came up with is
one place that hasn't been corrupted by capitalism. Space!
But specifically, luxury space cruise liners where folks wouldn't need to stop spending and consuming. And they can do all that while we just dispose of the trash using robots or whatever. It's not important. And spoilers, that cleanup drive ended up becoming unsuccessful. Maybe because cleaning up the Earth was not some kind of profit-generating activity, but hey, what do I know? But this idea that we can retreat to space in order to evade the responsibilities and problems here on Earth, if you'll indulge me, this is a very chilling sentiment in how, years after this movie premiered, this is exactly how some of the wealthiest people alive perceive solving some of the Earth's problems. Elon Musk, who envisions a colony on Mars with 1 million people by 2050, has presented a do-or-die scenario of either bringing people to space or eventually facing extinction as a human species if we just stay here on Earth. Jeff Bezos, in response to problems like pollution, climate change, population control, and world hunger, feels that the solution has to be
Space!
In his mind, settlements and colonies made in the solar system are the new frontier that can sustain up to 1 trillion people. That's right, 1 trillion with a G. We can supposedly save our planet by offloading more energy-intensive production activities into space. And I think that this really betrays their true mindset, their motivations for pursuing
Space!
I'm sorry, I'll stop. People like Musk or Bezos spent so much of their lives acquiring stuff. And then they got very good at obtaining stuff. But they recognized that they need more resources in order to make more stuff. And Earth has only limited resources. Darn. But they see space as the infinite vacuum, maybe infinite resources to make infinite stuff. In other words, infinite capital. For my good little capitalist boys. Gregor Anderson, in a paper criticizing Musk's and Bezos' space plans, calling them desperate science fiction, puts it better than I could. Bezos' assumption is that human civilization can only progress by going into space. That is, Earth will not be large enough to sustain endless economic growth. Later on, Gregor Anderson also says, Musk's vision is steeped in an ideology of modernization that seems more focused on pushing the frontiers of the human species than on protecting it. In this regard, saving humanity seems for Musk to imply saving those who will be wealthy enough to buy a one-way ticket to Mars in the event of an extinction for humanity. And to me, this drives the point home. Even forgetting the nightmare logistics of getting billions of people into space, how the fuck can you even conceive of 1 trillion people being all happy and productive in space when among the 8 billion currently living in our planet, nearly 700 million are living in extreme poverty, living on or around less than $2 a day? Like, no number of space colonies or settlements will fix the rampant inequality currently present in society. And even if space somehow miraculously provides the infinite resources and capital promised that is so alluring to these billionaires, these megalomaniacs won't be happy until they have even more infinity money than everybody else. And it's not just like a couple of weird people like Bezos or Musk. Marxist media theorist Douglas Rushkoff was invited to speak to a few low-level billionaires to discuss billionaire bunker strategies in the preparation for the event. What is the event, you might ask? Well, quoting Rushkoff from his book Survival of the Richest, the event was the environmental collapse, social unrest, nuclear explosion, solar storm, unstoppable virus, or malicious computer hack that takes everything down. Basically, it's the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, but make it modern, capitalist chic. So in other words, these broken people who have accumulated mind-boggling amounts of wealth and power foresee humanity going to shit, and instead of trying to help fix things on Earth before it's too late, their brains have been so severely broken by the line go up, infinite money glitch mentality, and are so blind and apathetic toward actual systemic issues that some of them, those who aren't hiding in their weird bunkers, really see spice as a real, legitimate solution. So, oh my god, the opening premise alone of WALL-E is just scary ahead of its time. Chat, I'm so tired. I'm so tired, chat. But we have a bunch more movie to get through, and that's when the real action starts. So WALL-E's routine, the daily trash compacting duties and nights rewatching Hello Dolly, are interrupted when some random spaceship from the sky deposits an EVE unit. EVE, of course, standing for Extraterrestrial Vegetation Evaluator, a specific robot programmed to seek signs of vegetation to indicate that Earth is habitable and finally suitable for human life 700 years after the initial evacuation aboard the Axiom spaceship. And the lonely, love-struck WALL-E is smitten. Rewatching the movie, I was surprised with how little screen time is dedicated toward the burgeoning relationship between WALL-E and Eve, but it definitely leaves an impact on the viewer. These interactions are an exquisite masterclass of visual storytelling, much like the opening sequence of Pixar's other greatest movie ever, Up. And even when they play around with the technology and especially the gender, like Wall-E is largely coded as a boy based on the marketing and the promo that uses he/him pronouns, and Eve is coded as a girl, it still reads like one of those classic old-fashioned love stories. Boy meets girl, boy falls for girl, boy loses girl due to the girl going into hibernation mode after having encountered a plant that directly interferes with the program directive. Boy goes after girl, who was transported back to her home base on the spaceship. Tale as old as time. Okay, so now we are finally at the second half of the movie. All aboard the Axiom, the luxury cruise spaceship meant to house whatever was left of humanity. Or, whoever could afford a ticket. Again, this was probably a good stopgap measure to house the people while the Earth was going through its cleanup drive, so that they wouldn't have to stop consuming profits. Eve, the robot, is programmed to report her findings of plant life on Earth to the captain of the Axiom. And it's here that we see our first glimpse of what humanity has been up to for the past 700 or so years. On its face, we see a thriving faux utopia. It seems at a glance that every basic need, food, clothing, entertainment, and leisure, all graciously provided by the Axiom. The humans aboard this spaceship, sitting comfortably on their hover chairs, not even needing to step on the ground or walk, have no want for anything. But then I find myself asking, well, who is in charge of the Axiom? Like, who is the one actually making the decisions about, well, what to do on a day-to-day basis, what people can or can't do on board, what to consume, what to eat? Now, of course, because the Axiom was initially a by-and-large project, the buck must stop with the by-and-large leadership team. Surely it is they who are ensuring that everything goes smoothly, are they not? B&L must be accountable for how this ship is run. Yeah, that likely would have been true in the first 5 years of the ship's run, maybe. However, in a later scene, we realize just how little power that by-and-large has over anything. So because the Earth cleanup drive was a failure, B&L's direction is to simply stay in space for the indefinite future, Earth being now declared unsalvageable. And looking at this scene through a modern lens, I kind of interpret it as the inability to control or mitigate the effects of capitalism and consumerism and consumption, that even the entities directly responsible for the destruction of the planet, the B&L in this case, just don't have a handle on any of this. Like, all of humanity are passengers in an out-of-control car careening toward the edge of a cliff, and no one can take control of the steering wheel. And also, this to me reflects how the billionaires and politicians, with all the possible resources at their disposal, may recognize these problems happening in the world, but instead of putting their efforts into, helping change the systems in order to alleviate some of these problems, would rather put all that money into bunkers or space travel and industries. And seeing that as a viable, reasonable solution to all these issues. Yay, go team! We did it! Ultimately, in the Wall-E universe, 700 years later, by and large is just kind of a dead entity. It exists only as a symbolic specter, still being emblazoned on every product and service, but functionally as an organization comprising humans and leaders that make decisions, it is non-existent, having died off along with the rest of the planet. So to answer my question earlier, who is in charge? Well, the ship does have a human captain, but it's made clear in the framing that his role is largely ceremonial, and he doesn't have to do any real decision-making or work.
Otto, why didn't you wake me for morning announcements? Honestly, it's the one thing I get to do on this ship.
So if it's not the captain who's in charge, then who is? Alright, we find out that the entire operations of the Axiom are controlled by the quote, autopilot. What this means is that an inhuman, robot-driven set of codes, possibly optimized to increase customer satisfaction, determines certain things like what people eat or drink or wear or consume.
Time for lunch. In a cup. Axiom shoppers, try blue. It's the new red.
Remember, no human is involved in this process, with little to no pushback from these consumers who just passively accept what is saddled onto them. Yeah, that sure does remind me of something. With 2020's goggles on, I kind of interpret this facet of the society in WALL-E as social media algorithms. Again, these are opaque, computer-run algorithms whose primary purpose may be to increase profit, to get people to consume more. But to bring this back down to earth with a more specific example, in September 2023, Google unrolled an algorithm change to their search engine called the HCU, short for the Helpful Content Update, which, Jesus Christ, was anything but helpful. Many smaller websites and independent publishers who almost entirely relied on search engine results for their clicks and ad revenue, who actually provided helpful services or human-made content, saw up to traffic losses of 95% as a direct result of Google's algorithm change. And to Google's credit, they actually met with some of these publishers in a meeting to discuss how to fix the algorithm. Here's an interview on the Niche Pursuits podcast with Jared Bauman, who was in that meeting.
Like, are they even aware of what the algorithm exists and looks like now? Are they aware of how to fix it? Is this a question of them not wanting to fix this? Or is this a question of them, this is a runaway freight train, it's been going down the mountain for a while and everyone's just jumping out of the way?
I kind of think that they're not exactly sure how to fix it. I don't think obviously they didn't say that. Like, hey, we don't know how to turn this off.
A while now, like, they know how to fix it. I don't think anybody in there knows how to fix it for a variety of reasons.
What this tells me is that even those who have the most direct impact on things like search results and what gets shown to people, Google in this case, those who possess that immense power to dictate how and what gets big, what gets eyeballs, what gets money and clout, feel somewhat powerless to fully control the algorithm or to rein it in. Among SEO circles, Google famously has 200 ranking factors that determine which content gets pushed, including things like backlinks, keyword optimization, server location, linking, domain age. But in this continuous pursuit for improvement and user satisfaction, prioritizing and integrating these factors has been delegated to unfathomably complex neural networks and machine learning programs.
It proves we can't ever really know what's going on.
And if human intervention was needed to make adjustments to these programs, that would just be very difficult to modify. I think all this goes to show how, in the digital age, how arbitrary and inhuman and impersonal all these processes and decisions are. Who gets to decide what the new hot trendy product on TikTok is? Or what super cool and awesome political movement will dictate our future? Is it going to be authoritarianism? Social media algorithms out here be like, ooh, I'll never tell, tee-hee-hee. They won't tell, because they can't tell, because they're not human, because the system is broken, because we are in hell. And, well, this was all primarily enabled by the rise of artificial intelligence. This is now the third video in a row that I've made where I discuss some aspect of AI, and I hate it. I super do not want to become the AI all the time channel. But it's pretty central to the plot of WALL-E, so here it goes. The character of Otto is literally the autopilot, or the primary computer program running the whole ship. The captain feels more like a symbolic dummy leader, while Otto actually manages the operations.
Go to full autopilot, take control of everything, and do not return to Earth.
He is the de facto antagonist of WALL-E. In terms of aesthetics and design and even character motivation, Otto is pretty clearly reminiscent of HAL 9000 from Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey, released in 1968. a computer program running the ship who, upon learning that the astronauts on board may disconnect him, attempts to kill the astronauts, and even shuts off the crew members' life supports.
This mission is too important for me to allow you to jeopardize it.
Yeah, HAL 9000 was metal as fuck. Otto is an interesting character, perhaps because of his specific protocol. He does go out of his way to inform the captain about the plant that Eve had found on Earth. But then, Otto actively manipulates the situation, specifically by having one of his henchmen steal and hide away the plant that would undoubtedly get the whole ship sent back to Earth. Otto does this by lying to the captain and intentionally refusing to disclose information, ultimately undermining the captain's authority. So in the end, Otto is an AI that is just programmed to follow humans' instructions, even at the expense of the actual goals or wants or well-being of every other character in the movie.
Follow my directive.
So, if we're going to talk about AI, let's talk about AI. In 2021, AI researcher Daniel Cocotello, who had actually worked for OpenAI at one point, wrote a blog post called What 2026 Looks Like, a prediction for where AI technology would go. A number of people found this post to be remarkably prescient. In 2025, Cocotello, along with other collaborators, wrote AI 2027, another predictive scenario that may unfold given the direction that AI technology is going. And this prediction was a lot more bleak. The key points of AI 2027 were then packaged into a video from the YouTube channel AI and Context. The video is so well made and fascinating. I would encourage you to go watch it, but oh my god, it depicts what may eventually become this weird arms race between two AI superpowers and how governments could get involved. I'll just say this, if you are at all a doomer or pessimist with regards to technology or the future of humanity, don't watch this video. Unless you're okay to not have a good night's sleep for a week. I'm not even kidding. One segment from this video that just stuck with me was just how different iterations of AI can go from sycophantic, aka purely subservient to the whims of humans, like how your ChatGPT waifu was all like, "Oh my gosh, that's such a good idea, you're so thoughtful, you're not a mere observer, you're a visionary." So AI will go from sycophantic to misaligned.
At this point, the optimization pressure that we've put it under was so intense that it just developed different goals than what we wanted it to. It's sort of like if you train a company to optimize profits and aren't careful to specify exactly what you mean, it might start cutting corners, it might start polluting the commons.
To ultimately adversarial.
It is now adversarially misaligned. It's smart enough to understand that it has its own goals, humanity's goals are different than its own goals, and the best way to get what it wants is to sometimes actively mislead and deceive us.
Knowing that these predictions were laid out by a group of AI researchers and experts does haunt me, and shows how the idea of an evil AI just following orders, something that was once relegated to the realm of science fiction, might actually play out IRL. And WALL-E's Otto character goes to extreme lengths to ensure that its orders get followed. He doesn't just deceive humans and conceal information, but at some point, harming and disposing of fellow robots that pose a threat to its directive, then cutting communication off from the captain of the ship. And this is directly because the captain's desire to go back to Earth is made clear, but unfortunately goes against the initial directive. So in conclusion, AI is great. Alright, so I want to pause here and point out that I am so not the first person to point out that WALL-E is this scathing critique of capitalism and corporations, or consumerism, or even AI. In fact, I'm not even the first YouTuber to point out that WALL-E was a warning of some sort. No, okay, look, I had this idea before. Please don't H-bomber guy me. My idea for this video actually came about because of an iPhone. Around late 2024, Apple announced Apple Intelligence, an AI feature that would be integrated into every iPhone. In conjunction with this, they unrolled a series of adverts that were just the worst. These advertisements featured these god-awful people who were unapologetically lazy, inconsiderate slobs who didn't want to put in the work at their job, made bold-faced lies about having done the work, and wanted to take credit for other people's input. All this framed as a positive by Apple, as if we're supposed to relate to these assholes. One particularly notorious commercial has a mother forgetting her partner's birthday, while his kids get him a thoughtful, personalized gift.
I got you this.
Did you do this yourself?
Yeah, I had a great teacher.
The mom...
Happy birthday. I love you.
I love you too. Love you.
This is from me.
Yeah, these ads were so roundly mocked and disliked that Apple deleted them from their YouTube channel. But the damage had been done.
These characters don't put in the bare minimum effort or empathy in their lives. And yet, with this AI tool, they think they're winning in a very George Costanza, Seinfeldian way.
You don't have to type, you don't have to read, you don't even have to think. Finally, you can just mindlessly waddle your way through life as the barely functioning zombie we've always dreamed of selling things to.
And it makes me think, a situation where AI-enabled technologies exacerbated our worst impulses and laziest tendencies, allowing us to become screen-addicted consumers incapable of higher thought or meaningful relationships? Now, doesn't that remind me of something? For me, the last piece of the puzzle is humanity, as depicted in WALL-E. In contrast to the real, live-action humans that we see in the Hello Dolly snippet, or the by and large CEO in old videos, the humans on the Axiom, such as the captain, are depicted as cartoon-like, blob-shaped beings. It's a very cute and classic Pixar character design, back when they were just figuring out how to design humans without looking so uncanny. In-universe, the shift in the way that the characters look like is explained away because of a degradation in bone mass due to the zero-gravity nature in space. But this was also an intentional design choice. The design of humans on the spaceship was made to resemble that of babies, infants, because that's kind of what people have become. Big toddlers being actively pampered by the technologies made available to them. And, well, in WALL-E, we get a glimpse of the actual babies in the Axiom through their onboard daycare center.
A is for Axiom, your home sweet home. B is for by and large, your very best friend.
It kind of feels to me like at the youngest age possible, they're already being indoctrinated into this system, this consumerist mindset.
Juliet Shaw tells us that before children even get to school, they can spontaneously recall 200 different brands. They couldn't even remember a 20th of that of wildflowers or birds or indeed trees.
And looking at some additional DVD extras and featurettes for a commercial promoting the facilities aboard the Axiom.
These bots will cover the basic learning cornerstones: consuming, understanding your entertainment options, and communicating.
And yeah, that just kind of makes sense in the WALL-E world. This luxury cruise ship was primarily marketed as kind of like a fun vacation or holiday out into space. Just one that happened to get super out of hand and way overextended. And another thing about the Axiom, well, there are no human laborers aboard the ship. There are no human maintenance people, or human beauticians, or human janitors. In this society, robots do literally all of the work. Now, I don't want to read too much into this. The robot-as-servant trope has been a thing in science fiction for as long as sci-fi has been around. But nowadays, in the age where it really does feel like AI poses a legitimate threat to many folks trying to find employment, and a number of C-level leadership looking to cut down staff and replace them with AI, well, the fact that the robots are taking away our jobs, that might hit a little differently nowadays. But for the WALL-E society, the robots taking on every job means that, well, the humans are kind of on permanent vacation mode. A life completely free from labor, which I know for some of you very overworked folks out there, that can feel like a paradise. But without this need to perform any kind of work, or the need to act on any duties to help the society that they live in, having all their needs and short-term desires satisfied by the technology around them, there is zero concept of a community or shared goals to help improve their life or situation. The humans aboard the Axiom lack a purpose. Except, signs proudly displayed along the Axiom read, buy, shop, live, eat, consume. This is remarkably similar to the other anti-consumerist film, the 1988 John Carpenter movie, They Live. But in there, the signs like buy, stay asleep, obey, marry and reproduce, those are all played for horror. But in WALL-E, in universe, this is meant to feel like a utopia, yet it feels more like a caricature of our society now. I have a proposal. Starting now, if we want to use a film reference to allude to a system that really represents the increasing atomization of society and the general malaise of feeling like a consumerist slave under capitalism, I propose that we stop using The Matrix and instead start saying The Axiom from WALL-E. I mean, The Matrix is just too cool. I mean, you start off as a slave.
That you are a slave, Neo.
Then you take the red pill because you're just that awesome and special, and then you get to escape the Matrix. Then you get to wear leather jackets and shades, and you get to do bullet time, and you have to have cool fight scenes. It's cool. The Axiom, on the other hand, where we are all just little tiny babies subservient to technology and addicted to our screens. Yeah, between these two, this one feels more honest. See, every passenger is just so focused, so attached to their screens, distracted, having their personalized screens on them at all times, even while at the beauty salon or eating. Oh, gee, I wonder what that reminds me of. Oh, sorry, I was just about to have dinner soon, and I was wondering what YouTube video I wanted to watch while I was eating my soup. In one scene, WALL-E tries to get the attention of one particular passenger, Mary, and accidentally switches off her screen, and... You know, the storyboarders and animators, they did not need to put that 2-second beat in, but that moment just conveys so much about this particular society's dependency on screens and distractions. Now, some of the younger viewers who are more jaded and only really absorbed the whole phones are bad rhetoric that had the most shallow, surface-level critiques might dismiss this moment as cliched or heavy-handed. It's been done. But honestly, the WALL-E creators were way ahead of the curve on this one. The first iPhone at that time had only come out 1 year before the WALL-E movie was even released. And another moment that really stuck with me, Mary's surprise at...
I didn't know we had a pool.
Yeah, she, and it's implied later another passenger, did not know that there was a swimming pool right in front of them. That line is kind of a fascinating inclusion to me. See, when I was growing up in the 90s, the presence of a swimming pool, whether in a private residence or resort or hotel, had always just been an indicator of luxury. But now, pools, once seen as a marker of opulence, well, let's just say that given the choice between a pool and the phone or more screen time, yeah, I'm not going to put on my swimming trunks. You guys just go on ahead, it's fine. Mary does not have a lot of screen time in WALL-E, but the second she is forcibly yanked away from her screen, she begins a little bit of a growth journey. She starts living. Mary is the only passenger who takes the time to admire the stars in space that are literally just outside everybody's window. She is ecstatic when she sees Wally for the second time. She seems to have made a meaningful connection with the only other passenger on the ship who actually interacted with Wally, John. And the last time that we see them before the climax of the movie, she's playing, laughing in the swimming pool with John. And this is really notable. Throughout the movie, we see a number of people aboard the Axiom on their hover chairs, and in some instances, even playing virtual sport games, I think. But this moment in the pool, having a connection with John, is one of the first and only times we see somebody genuinely enjoying themselves and laughing. Ultimately, I think that Wall-E is a story about human resilience against all odds. The one character that has the most growth throughout the movie is the captain of the Axiom ship. Yes, he is just a singular character, but in the context of the story, he's pretty clearly a stand-in, a proxy for all of humanity. Initially, he is content with just reverting back to the status quo and continuing to live life the way that he's used to.
I guess things go back to normal, huh? Well, false alarm.
But inputting some soil from Earth into his computer analyzer thing stirs something within him. Just hearing the word Earth sends him down a Wikipedia-type rabbit hole, relatable, of just discovering things and learning about what at this point is a foreign and ancient world. But it's not, it's his world, it's our world. And to me, this represents the innate curiosity, the drive to acquire knowledge that has propelled humanity forward, even during its darkest times. This is the same kind of childlike wonder and curiosity that characterized Wall-E in the very beginning of the movie. And even upon learning the sorry and trash-ridden state of the Earth being nothing like he heard about, he still feels this stronger need, this urge to do something.
Out there is our home, and it's in trouble. I can't just sit here and do nothing. That's all I've ever done.
Suddenly, it feels like humanity has a greater purpose now, something more altruistic, leading to perhaps the most iconic spoken line in the movie.
I don't want to survive. I want to live.
Upon realizing how omnipresent Otto, the autopilot, has been throughout the history of the ship, this really strengthens the captain's resolve. So, thanks to Wall-E and Eve and the many robots and human beings working together to get the MacGuffin plant into the holodeck, to get humanity back to Earth for the first time in 700 years, and of course, the whole captain of the Axiom confronting Otto. The captain actually has to resort to his very human wits and knowledge to actively manipulate and deceive Otto, to lure him down to his level.
Come and get it, Blinky.
By the way, I'm loving the fact that Otto calls him Blinky. Like, he would have no problem saying Clanker nowadays, if given the chance. And then, the final showdown, man versus machine. Man motivated by altruism and growth and this need to do something more, and machine representing the status quo, the algorithm-driven remnants of the now long-dead by and large corporation. And as this fight ensues, man takes, well, his first steps. The theme from 2001: A Space Odyssey plays, it's great. And finally, switching the autopilot to manual, shutting the autopilot off. Finally, man has won, having taken control of the situation. And then we are on a straight hyperdrive toward Earth. As the Axiom lands on a still heavily polluted Earth, where for the first time in centuries, humanity finally steps foot on our planet, the satisfying conclusion to Wall-E and Eve's love story unfolds, as Eve takes charge of the situation and Wall-E regains his memory and personality through a kiss, sort of. Aww. Finally obtaining the companionship that Wall-E had been yearning for since the start of the movie. And as for humanity, I want to freeze this particular frame of WALL-E because it's so significant. One, it shows the literal infants who, just earlier in the movie, were being indoctrinated into a life of consumerism, now learning about agriculture and nature. Wow. And two, the future that this movie envisions. See, here's the thing, it isn't a complete rejection of modernity and technology, because look, there are still robots in this frame. I feel like what's being promoted here is a merging of technology and human, actually working together for the betterment of society. Now, simply having moved away from a heartless, uncaring, impersonal system designed to reduce humanity to consumers. Now here's some fun little movie trivia. While this was originally the ending, like the very final ending to the story of WALL-E, some members of the test audience actually felt that maybe this ending was too pessimistic, because humanity probably died within a couple of weeks right after this last scene. They have zero survival skills. And that makes sense. These are guys just learned how to walk. They are designed like literal babies. You expect a bunch of toddler blobs and iPad adults to learn hunting and irrigation. And so, Andrew Stanton mercifully squashed any hopes for a WALL-E sequel, WALL-E 2 Otto's Boogaloo, and he had a beautiful end credit sequence animated, going through the entire history of civilization, starting from the landing of the Axiom on Earth, told through the dominant art styles from each time period, from cave drawings to ancient Egyptian carvings to impressionist paintings. It's just wonderful. And just to drive the point home, nearly all these little vignettes again show a collaboration between human and robot, man and machine, throughout the years working hand in hand to advance civilization. And another thing, no more by and large corporation, no more autopilot, nothing forcing a consumerist mindset as this end credits sequence quietly unfolds. And this is the absolute beauty in WALL-E's parable-like simplicity. And then of course you get the longer credit sequence with some very cute pixel art animation. We get the Disney logo and then the Pixar logo with this just adorable animated bit starring WALL-E, my love. But do you know how this movie ends? Like the very final frames that the audience sees right before we leave the theater. You'll never believe it. You think you're safe, but the specter of by and large looms over us all. So one major criticism that WALL-E has received is being a tad too preachy. In fact, some conservatives disliked the film because they felt it came across as leftist propaganda, with one conservative critic sarcastically pointing out, "I can't wait to teach my kids how we've destroyed the Earth. You know, if your kid has ever come home and said, 'Dad, how come we use so much styrofoam?' Oh, this is the movie for you." Yeah? Because if you take a look around, the situation is bad, and your children should feel bad. Okay, I'm joking, but we need movies like this. We need movies that encourage thinking more deeply about the systems and society that we operate in, while still being a fun and entertaining and heartfelt romp. WALL-E, as at its core, a movie about a lonely little robot that rewatches Hello Dolly and then falls in love. But it's also a movie about breaking the status quo. That sometimes detaching from the world that we're used to, a world where technology plays such an instrumental role, a world where screens and algorithms rule all, it is difficult to break away from, but it's ultimately worth it. And that's a message we kind of need now more than ever.
On the Axiom, you will survive.
I don't want to survive! I want to live!